line. CJ I, now I gotta roll with ice. No rush, go move dumb. Pushing, so move dumb. Peace and love turn to peace and gloves. Now you gotta do a run.
Welcome to another episode. We are less than 2 weeks out from the legendary Corduroy Enduro for off-road riders in North America, especially in Canada. This holds a special place in our schedule. This ride is now going on its 69th year, and the history of the Corduroy Enduro could be talked about for an entire episode. But what I want to get into in this episode is offering some tips, suggestions, things that I've learned over the years that have been passed on to me from far better and more experienced riders than I am on how to properly approach this race that's going to increase your chances of success, however you may define that. For a lot of people doing the Corduroy for the first time, or maybe even many times, just completing this event is a huge win for them. For others, they're trying to do better than they have in previous years. However you define success, I'm confident that some of these tips might help you get there. So what I hope to explore in this video is go over, first of all, your bike prep, your gear prep, personal prep, and then how you want to prep for the race itself using different strategies. So let's start first with this year's race. This is going to be the biggest race yet for the Corduroy Enduro. Everyone's talking about how many people are involved. We're at well over 600 riders now. The last I checked, it was like 615. It might even be up to 640 now. I have no idea, but it's going to be extremely competitive this year. In my class alone, which is the Vet Expert class, I believe there's up to 70 riders right now. I don't know how many pros are coming, but a lot of people from the US are coming. Previous Corduroy winners like our Canadian champ from previous years, Philip Cheney, will be here. Last year's winner, Russell Bobbitt. We also have Evan Smith, who's won, a couple guys from the US. And that's kind of the neat thing about the Enduro. It's often this battle between Canada and the US back and forth, going all the way back to Sharpless and Penton and all those guys. So if you don't know about the history of the Corduroy, I highly recommend you look into it, look into the blog, look at some of the articles, and especially what some of the previous winners have done to create this legacy of a race. But for you, let's try and get into how you first approach this race. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the race format. And to be clear, what I'm referring to here is the 2-day Saturday and Sunday event. I'm not referring to the vintage format. I'm not referring to the e-bike. I'm not referring to the youth enduro. This is the first year they're going to be doing youth enduro, and really excited about that. My kids are racing, and who knows, maybe one of us will finally bring home a Corduroy log, because it's not going to be me. But this video is about the adult class that's running Saturday and Sunday, the standard Corduroy Enduro. Now this is done in what's, I guess you could say, an ISDE format. In many ways it's meant to replicate what happens at the ISDE. And that includes things like time test sections, so transits, and then you get to a test section, you enter the test section, and then that test section is time, you come out and another transit. At the end of the day, your bike is locked up in what they call a parc fermé, and you have to leave your bike overnight. You're not allowed to work on it or anything like that. And then the next day, you take your bike out, wheel it to the start line, don't start it, and then you're going to start your second day. Now, there are some allowances of how you can work on your bike, and we'll get into that shortly. But just as a general format, this is a long, grueling race with about 120 kilometers a day. And depending on the class that you're in, you're going to be doing more or less. And that is going to affect the difficulty as well. So within the class you've chosen, there are 4 different groups, and that is determined by arrows. So when you come up to any arrow, generally the arrow is going to be orange. That's the default arrow. That's the standard one that you're always going to be following. But sometimes the arrows may change. And when you see the arrow colors change, that's where you need to know what arrow group you are in. So in the first arrow group, the orange, you've got Women's Pro, Intermediate A, and Intermediate B. So that's easy for them because they're always just going to be following the same arrows. But for other classes, let's start with Pro. So Pro, expert and vet expert, whenever they see pink arrows, they're going to be following those arrows. And that may take them up Green's Mountain. It may take them to another difficult test that only they are doing. Unless you're in those 3 classes, you definitely do not want to be following the pink arrows. The other arrow group is blue. Blue is Novice A, Novice B. Let me just check my notes here. Women's Intermediate, Vet 55, and Vet 50 this year. Now, it could change from year to year, so you got to make sure that when you sign up, when that brochure comes out, look at it, make sure you know your arrow groups, and obviously attend the riders meeting so you're aware of what it is that you're doing. But blue is another group, and then green is the final group, and that's going to consist of Vet C, Novice C, and Women's Novice. So the green group. And so as you can imagine, difficulty of the tracks are going to be determined by arrow, and that's why you get some splits from here to there. Let's talk about how this race works. So the first thing you're going to be doing when you arrive to Gooderham, Ontario, is you're going to be driving into the community center, and you're going to find a place to park and set up. Most people will spend the weekend. You can camp there. The community center allows for a lot of parking. They don't have a lot of facilities. They've got a washroom and porta potties, but that's about it. So don't expect anything fancy unless you've got a fancy trailer. One of the first things you're going to do when registration is open is go there. Start with a sound test of your bike, because you're not going to be able to register until your bike is sound tested. So get on your helmet, get on your boots, go over to the technical inspection, excuse me, and once you've got your sound test sign off, then you can take your sheet and go into the registration proper. So just to break that down, you go get your sheets, and then you go to your technical inspection, you get signed off on your sound, which needs to be under, I want to say 94 decibels. And then once you've got signed off on technical inspection, then you can go in and register proper, which will include getting your number plate and any other things that they're going to provide you. So now, once you've got that, you can stick the number plate on your bike, and you are pretty much ready to go. Now, that's assuming a lot. That's assuming that you've properly prepared yourself and the bike to make sure that you're going to finish these 2 grueling days. So let's talk about how we set up our bike first, because this is probably the most important part of finishing this race. Bike prep. The first thing that you want to understand is that this is very much a test of both rider and machine. And you need to make sure that if at any point your bike is as perfect as it can be, it's before you run the Corduroy. And at this point, you've been riding all season. You've probably been neglecting it in many ways, but you really need to take a few days to do everything that you might do in a full breakdown of your bike. Maybe not, fully take it apart, but I can't emphasize how important it is to go over your bike and make sure that everything is tight. So go through every bolt, go through every spoke, go through every lever, everything you can. Just make sure, grab a few wrenches, a few sockets, and make sure that everything is tight, because the Corduroy is something that, like I said, you're going to be doing well over 200 kilometers, and you have to ask yourself, how many times have you done 3 or 4 days worth of riding, assuming an average ride is 40, 50K, and not had to do any repairs or lost some part on your bike? That's why it needs to be as perfect as possible. Check your spokes, check your bolts, change your grips, make sure that your tires are fresh, and make sure everything is as perfect as it can be. Definitely change your oil, change your air filter, so that when you go into the Corduroy, your bike really is going to be able to withstand the grueling 200 kilometers and perhaps a lot of banging around to finish this race. Once your bolts are good, go through your bike and check all of your fluids. Not only your oil, obviously you change that, make sure that it's at the proper volume, but check your coolant. If you're running a TPI style bike, make sure that your oil is up on that. Check your brake fluid, check your clutch fluid if you're running hydraulic clutch. Check all of that, because if there's any time it's going to fail, or when old fluid is not going to work anymore, this is the time. Change your fluid, make sure it's all topped up, make sure your bike is perfect as it can be, like it just came from the factory. When you are looking at this setup, again, coming back to the question of what's your goal here, you often have, as you do with all races, you have a question about what do you want? Do you want to maximize durability or do you want to maximize speed? And with a corduroy, a lot of weight needs to be put towards durability. So for example, in an XC, I might be running tubes, no protection on my bike at all, but that is not the way to approach the corduroy. So as you can see with my bike, I've got a lot of protection on it. This is my KTM 300 XCW. By the way, I will be at the KTM demo for Friday and Saturday, so come say hi. Take out a bike, but definitely we can chat more about this bike setup, whatever you want. I'll be there both days helping out with KTM, giving out bikes to try. But behind me you can see my 300 XCW. There's a lot of protection on it. Just to go through some of the basics, you've got radiator guards, you've got a skid plate. Other protection includes flags or wraparounds. I won't get into the controversy of that, but my preference certainly is flags with some bar ends. But fundamentally, you want to make sure that your bike is not going to be stopped by something that is pretty predictable. And I think the most predictable thing in the corduroy is flat tires. Now, people might say run tubeless. They might say run heavy-duty tubes. At this point, I really don't think there is a debate. In my opinion, it just has to be mousses. Mousses have reached a point now where they're very durable, they last a long time, they feel great. Yes, they're a little bit heavier, not something I prefer in an XC, but with the corduroy, I just don't see how they can be beat. People might say, well, I like the flexibility of tubeless because I can inflate and deflate my tire. You're not going to have time for that during the race. And for the most part, you don't need to worry about it. The corduroy is not a hard enduro. You don't need to deflate your tires down to 2 or 3 psi. If anything, your bike setup is going to be quite consistent throughout. So mousses are advantageous for a lot of reasons. One, obviously, you don't blow your tires, which is huge because that I think is the easiest way to prevent your success with corduroy. And the other thing that it really allows is allows you to reduce carrying tools, because if you're using tubes or tubeless, you have to bring things like a pump, reamer, I don't know, whatever, I've forgotten at this point, but whatever else goes with carrying all those tools to fix. Plus, you're going to have to do a big trailside repair in the middle of a race, hoping that it's not during a test and only transit. If there's one thing you take from this video, if you take any of my advice from any of this, just it's mousses. Go mousses. Get them installed. If you don't know how to get them installed, find someone. I'm sure there'll be someone at the corduroy itself who can install them for you. The second thing I would recommend, and again, this is not as important as mousses, but it is important, is consider the use of a gummy rear tire. So gummies are not durable. You're going to go through it with the race. Myself, I'm actually going to have a second gummy on a rim ready to swap out. That might be a bit excessive for most people. But you will not, they don't last very long, but they give you a tremendous advantage as you're doing slippery rocks, roots, and things that the corduroy is known for, especially if you're running in the expert class, pro class, vet expert class. A gummy is going to be very, very important to finishing this race, especially as you get to things like Greens Mountain. For those of you not running, it's going to help you, but I wouldn't say it's as essential as some of the more treacherous terrain where steepness and slipperiness is a factor. The weather's looking good this year, but as soon as it gets wet and slippery, that gummy tire is really going to help. Lots of gummies out on the market. I'm not recommending one or the other. If you want to know what I'm running a Dunlop AT81EX. I like that tire because it's relatively thin at I think it's 110. So it allows me to have a nice balance between speed and stickiness. If I was doing a hard enduro, I might go to a 140 tire. But you've got your Kenda Ibex, Dunlop, Chinko. There's lots of gummies. Problem is they're hard to find right now, but hopefully you can get one because it will be worth it. All right, so now that you've got your bike protected, so you don't get things like punctures in your rad, again, rad guards, you want to make sure you have a skid plate. There's lots of rocks out there. You don't want to blow a hole in your engine case. Anything you can do to protect your bike is helpful. But again, there's a compromise. You don't want to completely fortify it and become so heavy and filled with mud that you're no longer racing. But if that's important to you, then by all means protect your bike as much as you want. Now it is, I wouldn't say inevitable, but it's highly likely that you're going to break something as you ride. And the parts that I bring with me, my spare parts, will include levers. That's my main thing that I break, is levers. And anything beyond that, like shifters, you could bring those as well. Now obviously if you're trying to bring all these parts, it's going to get very heavy, but there is a trick, and let me show you it. One of the things that I do with all the parts that I'm bringing is I attach them to the frame of the bike. And this is going to be very helpful in reducing the weight on your person. It's not only going to feel more comfortable, but you're not going to get as tired if you have parts that are on your bike instead of your person. Carrying an extra 10, 20 pounds over the course of 2 days and 200 kilometers is going to make a big difference. So here I've got my levers. I've got another one on the other side. I put my brake lever on the respective side, and then I put my clutch lever on the other one. I just zip tie these in. You can do the same thing with a shifter or anything else that you want to do. You need to be a little bit creative here, and you can find different ways to strap things to your bike. And you can see here, I've got zip ties. So if I were to have a tire problem, my tire comes off the bead, for example, or if you're running tubes or tubeless, you blow a tire, you can wrap this with these big zip ties. They go all the way in there. That's a trick I learned from my buddy Lance Webb. So thanks, Lance, for that. Okay, so let's talk about the gear that we're going to be bringing. You have to figure out what it is that you need to work on your bike. And what I like to do is break that into gear that I need immediately, and then gear that it's a bigger problem and I'm going to have to stop and fix things. So here, I've got gear that I'm going to be carrying on me. And this tool by Motion Pro is great. It's got an 8 mil, 10 mil, 12 mil, and then there's another socket that I carry as well. And this has a versatility of using sockets, but it also allows you to use the bits that come with the KTM kit. I carry a knife with me. This is a suspension adjustment tool. You may not recognize that, but that goes with the 6500 kits and the WP Explorer Pro suspension that I'm going to be running. Spark plugs. Please, please, please bring spark plugs, because if you don't have a spark plug, there is a good chance you are going to end your race. Watering out is a big problem in the Corduroy, and you need to be able to change a spark plug, get your bike dried out, and keep going. What I also have here is some epoxy stick. This comes in handy if you were to break an engine case or some other really important part. You can do a lot of things with this epoxy. Essentially, it just turns into steel and allows you to patch up and keep going. I've got a 10 and 13 mil wrench that allows me to adjust my chain quickly if I need to, and perhaps some other things like brake bleeding, whatever I might need. But this here is all I'm going to be carrying on me insofar as tools go. And you may think, well, that's not enough. And I would agree with you, but I'm going to show you why. Similar to the parts, if you can put tools on your bike, then that's what you should do. So you'll see in here, in my airbox, I've got a lot of tools zip tied in. Now these are the tools that include a spark plug wrench, heavy duty pliers, and some more sockets and bolts. And the reason they're in there and not on my person is at this point, if I'm using these tools, I'm stopped. I'm not trying to do a quick fix. It's not a 30-second repair. I'm going to have to probably dewater my bike or something more involved. So I don't mind them being in a point where I have to cut those zip ties and start working on my bike, because I'm going to be at it for a few minutes anyway. The advantage of that, of course, is it allows me to reduce more and more weight and keep myself light, put the weight on the bike. If you're wondering how I did that, it's just in the airbox, zip ties, and I kind of zip tie each one individually to make it secure. You have to be creative on how that's going to work for your bike. Every bike is a little different, but you can do things like under the seat. I've actually got some safety wire tucked under the seat. You can do whatever you want, but just make sure that it's secure and that it's not something you need right away if it's going to be difficult. And the other thing, just, this is an 8mm bolt, and I've got my 8mm wrench on me. So if I need to get in there, the last thing you want to do is put your 8mm under. So the next question is, once you've figured out what sort of tools you're going to be bringing, what bag are you going to be using to carry that? And that really depends on what you've decided to carry on you. So here I've got 2 bags that, depending on really what the weather will be, I'm going to use. So either use my USWE 3, which is a 2-liter hydration, or I'm going to use my USWE Raw 12, which is 3 liters of hydration, but 12 liters of volume. So this would be a nice pack if I know it's going to be miserable and I can carry a jacket with me and perhaps some other things. This is what I wore in Romaniacs, but this is what I typically race with. And my preference, I think, will be to go with the Raw 3. And if I go with the Raw 3, what I usually do, and maybe even with the 12, is I use the USWE waist pack as well, because this waist pack allows me to put stuff that I want on me right away. So things like maybe an extra energy gel. It might be, if you're running a GoPro, some GoPro batteries. You might put your phone in there if you're bringing your phone. Anything that you can just access quickly and easily while you're waiting for tests to start. It's nice to have that ability to just pull something out and take it that way rather than take off your entire pack. Another thing you might want to think about is bringing along a microfiber cloth. So if it's wet out there, you might want to wipe your face, wipe your goggles, maybe even bring a couple of those, throw them in some zip ties. That's always nice to have something like that, and I would put that in my easily accessible compartment. Another nice thing to have is a fresh pair of gloves. These are light things that you can carry with you, and they're going to come in handy if it's wet. Even if it's not, you fall in a mud pit, and it's nice to have fresh clothes. A couple other things to think about is, you can see here, there's 2 spark plugs in cases, waterproof cases, but there's actually some silicone self-adhesive tape. That's really handy for fixing hoses and a lot of things. I'd recommend that. I've just wrapped it around one of the spark plug. The other thing is bringing a master link tool. If you break a link on your chain, just throw that in some of your bolts or anything like that. And I've got that on my bike in my bolt container. I usually bring some latex gloves with me if I'm doing some dirty repairs. It's muddy. It's nice to be able to keep your hands clean. And toilet paper, you never know. Let's talk about the race itself. Moving to day 1, the first thing you're going to be doing is heading up to the blocks, 6 or 7 people wide, and you're going to be starting the day on Saturday morning. The way it works is you're going to pull up based upon your line. So I'm running line 5. That means I'm minute 5. And after line 4 goes, I'm going to be right behind them, and I'm going to be pulling up. They're going to do a countdown. They're going to give you a lot of notice. They're going to tap in your helmet to make sure that your RFD that you've picked up at registration is working. And then they're going to count you down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
That's a good start. Morning. Beautiful day.
So the weekend begins, eh?
It does. Here we go.
So far so good. You're going on this minute too?
This is now the start of a test section, and it's going to end when you see the end of it. And test sections can be very different. They can be 1 kilometer long. They can be 20 kilometers long. So before you start every test section, you might want to think to put in your mind of what this test section is about. When the brochure comes out, there's going to be a whole grid of tests, their duration, the day. You're going to know what's coming. So there's different ways to do it. You can take that grid, shrink it down, and then tape it to your bars. I've done that in previous years. You can just write out test 1 kilometers and whatever other information you want. But you should have that information in front of you, because as you go from test to test, you're going to want to know, okay, this is test 3. What is this about, right? And writing down the name or the test number and the kilometers is really going to help you strategize because if you're either sprinting for 2 kilometers or you know it's a 20-kilometer test section that you need to pace yourself. So that's really important information to know. So the format that the first test, you're going to be heading into the demo track, into the woods, and then you're going to finish and then heading eastward into Wilberforce, into some longer test sections. At some point, you're going to get to a gas stop. A gas stop is either mandatory or it's optional. I believe there's only one optional gas stop this year. There was last year as well. If you don't need gas and you know you can make it to the next one, do not stop. And that's a good rule to have for this race throughout, is do not stop. Just keep going at all times. You stop when you have to stop. And what I mean by that is when you get to a test section and your minute hasn't flipped yet, let's say you're minute 20 and they're on minute 10, now take your 10 minutes. Look over your bike. Have your energy gel. You know, if you want to socialize, now's the time to socialize. Do not socialize at gas stops. This is not the time to go over how epic the last test section was. You are in a race. Never forget that. And if you can get into a test section, fuel up, grab a drink if you have one, and go. That's the way you want to approach this, because minutes can fly by very quickly, and you don't want to be wasting that at the gas section. For all you know, you may waste 10 minutes, and you may get to the next test section, and now you're way behind in your line. Here's why that's important. For those of you who don't know, there's different ways to not finish the corduroy. One is to have bike failure, injure yourself. The other is to hour out. And what they mean by that is if you are on minute 5 and you get to a test section and it is now 65, then I've now houred out. It's actually 66. But I'm over my hour. So if you're an hour behind your minute, you're done for that day. You're done for the race. You did not finish the corduroy. And that's why it's so important that these minutes matter so much. Don't stop at gas stations. Stop when you have to stop. Go at all other times. And you also have to pace yourself, because on transit sections, you can't just gun it. And there's speed limits, there's roads, and there are people doing radar. And if you get caught, it's anything between minutes of penalty all the way to complete disqualification, depending on how fast you're going on a speed restricted area. So consistency and in not just in pace, but also consistency in movement is really, really important to this race. Don't stop until you are required to stop. Gas stops. So when you get to a gas stop, there's going to be, first of all, there's a few trailers that are going to be set up that you need to leave your gas on before you head out. Those trailers are pretty limited in space, especially this year with 700 riders. And what that means is you're not going to be able to put your 20-liter gas can. In fact, I think they limit it at 10-liter gas cans. If you don't have enough gas cans, buy more. They're cheap. You can't put more than 10 liters on. So I run small 5-liter cans. That's enough. And I know that there's no gas stop that I'm going to need more than 5 liters. So I run these little 5 ones. They're very quick to fill up. They're easy. They're easy to throw back on the trailer, which you should do when you're done filling up your gas. Take your can, put it back on the trailer, and then you can keep going. The other thing you can do with your gas is you can add like maybe a drink or something to it. Just make sure that it's not a big cooler. Like you can tie a plastic bag or something like that. You can throw a sandwich on it. But it is not meant for you to have a lunch break. If you have a sandwich, fill up your bike, get your drink, fill up your hydro pack or whatever, and then if you've got your sandwich, get on your bike and go. Just keep that consistency. Minutes matter, so keep moving, fill up on your gas and go. Don't socialize, don't stop. And one other tip I'll give you is if there's a way to distinctly mark your gas can, for example, if you wanted to make sure that you can find your gas can, you might want to do something like this, which would make sense because it's a nice cloth to wipe yourself with. That way, when you come to a sea of red gas cans, you're going to know which one is yours because there's something distinctive about it. I had one friend who would actually tie a big plastic flower to it so he could find it quickly. So another thing to think about, you're going to need at least 3 gas cans, all of which 5 to 10 liters, and then you often need a larger one at your campsite so that you come back at the end of the day, you can fill up your smaller gas cans and put them back on the trailer. So bring lots of gas. Now that the day has ended, assuming that you haven't houred out, assuming your bike hasn't broken, assuming you haven't given up on life and haven't broken your soul, you're going to be coming to the finish and you're about to put your bike away for the night. So before you do that, before you put it in what's called a parc fermé, you have 15 minutes from the time you come into the end to put your bike in that parc fermé. They are timing you. They'll often mark you with a number on your helmet or on your number plate of what time you need to be back at, but that's your responsibility to figure it out. So look at your watch as soon as you finish. If it's 10:30, so it wouldn't be 10:30, but let's say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you know your bike has to be back in that parc fermé at 2:15. So have a plan. You're going to take your bike back to your campsite, and you've already created a plan of what's going to happen at that point in time. First thing you want to do as you pull up to your campsite is get gas in your bike and then start doing the other things that you want to do. Think to yourself, not just the stuff you know for sure you want to do, but the stuff you may need to do. So one of the things that you want to look at, for my plan, for example, I know that when I come in, I'm going to have my rear tire and all the tools I need ready to go. So when I pull my bike up, my stand is there, I put it on my stand, my tools are right there, I grab them, take the tire off, put it on, put it back on, and there I've got the one thing I want done. Do the initial tire swap or whatever it is you want to do. Tire and air filter are kind of the obvious ones. Have those out, have them ready to go. You can see here. So for me, for my air filter, it's already oiled, it's in a bag, it's sitting on a table by my race tent, ready to go. Air filter goes in, tire goes in, and I'm ready to go. The next thing I'm doing once I've got my gas, air filter, tire, is I'm looking around my bike. And if you can, you might even want to have a power washer set up. If it's dirty, you can wash your bike down and figure out what is it that I need to do, if anything. Look for damage on your bike. Look for any missing screws. Do an assessment of your bike. If you see that there's damage and things need to be done, or you know things need to be done, ask yourself, can I for sure get this done within the time I have left? If you can't, don't freak out, because once you've returned your bike to the parc fermé on time, the next morning you still have 15 minutes to work on your bike before you have to roll it up. Roll it up. Do not start your bike, but roll it up to the start line for day 2. So if you, for example, have, let's say, a broken lever and you don't know where your levers are, that's okay. Just know what you have to do for the next day and roll your bike into parc fermé, and then the next day when you go to pick up your bike, you're going to have your tools in hand, your lever in hand, everything that you need to do. Don't get fancy. Unless you're confident that you can fix this bike within the time that you have left before the parc fermé, do not try it, because the last thing you want is a wheel that's off, you can't get back on, and time is ticking and you're getting penalized. So have a plan, have it laid out, have it ready to go when you come back to your trailer on how to make sure that your bike is going to be put into that parc fermé. The bikes need to be on kickstands, so if you don't have a kickstand, you got to bring the stand with you and make sure that your bike can stand on its own. So now you've pulled into the parc fermé. Don't speed in the pits. Don't go crazy. There's bikes everywhere. Everyone's trying to get to their place to fix their bike. Be very focused on the time. Be very focused on getting your bike back in there. Put your kickstand up, and now you've finished day 1. Congratulations. Okay, now it's start of day 2. Assuming you've had an amazing dinner, you've celebrated, you've told all your buddies about how amazing the first day was, you've heard horror stories from other friends, but now you're in the zone and you're ready to start day 2. When you come up to parc fermé, you're going to be able to enter that 15 minutes before your time starts. So as you come up, let's say you start at 8:05 and 9:05, then I'm going to be allowed in there at 8:50 to get my bike. If I have work to do, I have to take my bike to the workstation area. I can't work on it on the kickstand. Roll it over. Do not start your bike. If you start your bike before the race starts, before your minute starts, you will be disqualified. Do not start your bike. Okay, I keep saying it, but people do it every year and they're very strict about this. So roll your bike over, do the repairs, if any, that you need to be done. And then once you've done that, you're rolling your bike, you're walking your bike up to the platform to yet again start the second day. And the second day doesn't typically start with a test. You just kind of roll off and start your day right into a transit. I may be wrong, it depends year to year, but that's how typically day 2 will start. We've talked a lot about bike prep, how to strategize with repairing your bike and everything like that. But let's talk about personal prep. As I said earlier, this is just about as much as a test of bike as it is a test of rider. And you need to make sure that you are properly hydrated is a big thing. So as you're approaching the corduroy, you want to make sure that you're hydrating yourself. Lots of great articles out there that you can read on what that means. But in short, you need to be drinking a lot of fluids, water leading up to the race. You should be overhydrated days before. Hydration starts days before a race, not on the day of. You can't just guzzle 3 liters of water the night before and you're hydrated. Hydration is throughout your entire body. It's extremely important because you're going to be losing so much fluid as you are riding. Hydration, nutrition. Obviously, I'm not going to get into what that means, but suffice to say, you need to eat a lot because you're going to be burning a lot of calories during this race. So for a lot of people who haven't done the corduroy, you haven't done something like this so athletically demanding in a very long time. It is pushing your body to the absolute limit. So whether that's a big pasta dinner the night before, carb loading, I prefer like pizza and sweet potato fries are kind of my go-to on the night before. And I will eat 2 or 3 pizzas easily before the night of a big race like the corduroy. So as I see it, you just can't eat enough. But you really have to put your mind to that because if you do not have the energy, you will not finish the race. Hydration while you're on in the race. As you saw earlier, what I do is I use the Usui packs or Camelbacks where you have the hydration as you're riding. I will go between 2 or 3 liter packs, and I don't typically go through all of that. And part of the reason is I don't go to the point of thirst. I'm constantly sipping. That's the proper way to hydrate yourself. So in between tests, you might have a few sips. Don't drink all of your fluid. Wait until you get to your gas stops, and you may have 2 or 3 water bottles waiting there for you, or a Gatorade or a BioSteel or whatever it may be. As far as nutrition on the trail, on the race, lots of options. I usually carry a Cliff Bar with me, and I really like these energy gels. I will go through 2 or 3 of those in a race, and I really like these BioSteels as well. These are just, it's electrolytes and flavoring that you can add to your water that is really going to help with your hydration. A newer thing I've been trying that my friend Lance recommended to me for Romaniacs is Carbion, and this is carbs that mix with water. So when I'm running 2 packs, I will run Carbion in one, usually my smaller one, and then I'll run water in my larger one with the BioSteel. Okay, so we have covered a lot. I really hope that this video has been helpful to you. One last area I'll touch upon is, I guess you could call it racecraft and how to approach this race from racing perspective. And I'll give you a few things that seem to help me. One good expression I've heard over and over again with corduroy is you can't win it on the first day. It's always decided on the second. And what is meant by that is you need to pace yourself. This is a long 2-day race, and if you are pushing yourself on the first day as hard as you can, and I've made this mistake a couple times, and you are crashing and hurting yourself, you are not going to be in a good condition for day 2. One crash can really affect the rest of the weekend and your chances of a favorable outcome. So pace yourself. And you should always be trying to ride in a certain degree of a comfort zone. There are tests that you might want to push it more because you're trying to gain a position or you're very comfortable with the test. But overall, I think you want to be aiming for that 85%. It's a comfort zone. You don't feel on edge unless you need to be because you're battling for a podium at the very end or something like that. It's really important to understand that this is a marathon, this is not a sprint, and you need to make sure that your pace reflects that. Another tip I would recommend, coming back to the idea of keep moving, is if people are all caught up in a bottleneck, look around, be smart, think the forest is a big place. I don't need to go up the exact way that this person is going up. Obviously, you need to stay within the intended race line and within the rules of Off-Road Ontario. You can't be cutting the track. I'm not suggesting that for a moment. But you certainly can go around people in ways that aren't to the obvious line. And the corduroy can get quite muddy, and you'll see people stuck everywhere. Just stop. If you take 2 or 3 seconds to think about your line, it could save you 15 minutes. It could save you the entire race, because getting stuck takes forever to get out again. So really be thoughtful about your lines, especially when you're coming up to bottlenecks and passing people. If you're a person who is trying this for the first time, maybe it's your first race, if you hear people behind you, pull to the side when it's safe to do so, and as soon as possible. You know, if you're running up in lines where people are coming up behind you quickly, it doesn't help you at all to try and block them. They're probably not in your class anyway. You can pull to the right or left, and maybe even indicate with your foot, say, you know, where to pass. That's what that means. So pass on that side or pass on that side. You can then follow them. They're obviously a better rider than you because they've caught up to you. And you can follow them, and nothing's easier than following a great rider. You're going to ride comfortably at a pace that you probably couldn't otherwise. So just be generous with that. If you're coming up to a rider who's slower, you know, I find the most effective thing to do rather than revving your engine is just come up with some sort of call. One of my favorites is Tristan Hart, and I heard him go choo choo. It's kind of funny because like train coming through. And you know, something distinctive to let people know that you're coming up. Try and be patient with people. Remember that not everyone is familiar with racing, and you know, keep it safe out there. If you see someone down and hurt, you have an obligation to stop and help them. Just keep track of your time, because if you stop and help someone, then you're going to be given back that time. You just have to let them know. And same thing, they won't hour you out if you've helped someone for half an hour who's severely injured. So the standard thing to do is just say, you know, are you okay? And they say, yeah, and you just keep going. But if they say I need help, then stop. You're obligated to do so. So there you go. I really hope that you have a great corduroy. By all means, come say hi at the KTM demo. I'll be there with the other KTM riders and crew, and come try out some of the new 2024 bikes. They are awesome, and you're going to absolutely love them. And you'll be able to get a bit of a sneak peek of what the demo track, the first test of the corduroy, is like before you head out there. Good luck, and enjoy the 69th annual corduroy.